Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin.
Lorraine Mercer adjusted the rearview mirror of her Tesla and studied the upscale Seattle restaurant ahead. The Ivy Room buzzed with Saturday afternoon energy, its glass facade revealing clusters of well-dressed women inside. She could see them through the windows. June's friends, the influencer crowd with their perfect makeup and designer handbags, all gathered for what should have been a celebration. She reached for the small velvet box on the passenger seat. The antique diamond brooch inside had belonged to her mother, passed down through 3 generations of strong women who had built something from nothing. Her fingers traced the worn edges of the box before she stepped out into the crisp Seattle air. The hostess recognized her immediately. "Ms. Mercer, right this way. Your daughter's party is in the private dining room." Lorraine followed, her business heels silent on the polished floor. The sound of laughter grew louder as they approached the back room. Through the doorway, she spotted June, immediately 28 years old, golden hair styled in perfect waves, wearing a white sundress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Mom." June's voice cut through the chatter like a blade. The room fell silent. Lorraine stepped inside, noting how June's friends shifted uncomfortably. These women knew about the estrangement, had probably heard June's version of their story countless times. "Hello, June." Lorraine kept her voice steady. "I brought you something." She held out the velvet box. June stared at it for a moment before taking it, her manicured nails clicking against the surface. The other women leaned forward as June opened it, revealing the intricate diamond brooch nestled in faded silk. "Oh my God, it's gorgeous," breathed one of the bridesmaids. June lifted the brooch, holding it up to the light. For a moment, something flickered across her face: recognition, maybe even gratitude. Lorraine remembered showing her this same piece when June was 7, telling her stories about great-grandmother Eleanor, who wore it when she started her first business in 1943. Then June's expression hardened. "It's sweet that you think this is still your place," June said, loud enough for everyone to hear. She set the brooch back in its box with deliberate care. "But I should probably be clear with everyone here." The room grew tenser. Lorraine felt the familiar knot forming in her stomach, the same one she'd carried through years of June's calculated cruelties. June stood up, smoothing her dress. "My mother won't be at the wedding. She doesn't belong in my life anymore." The words hit like ice water. Lorraine heard someone gasp softly. Another woman whispered something about family drama. June's maid of honor, a blonde influencer named Kenzie, stared at her phone screen, probably already crafting an Instagram story about the awkward scene. Lorraine looked at her daughter, really looked at her. June's chin was raised in defiance, but her hands were shaking slightly. This public humiliation wasn't spontaneous, it was planned. June had invited her here specifically for this moment, to cut her down in front of witnesses. "I see," Lorraine said quietly. She didn't argue, didn't plead, didn't give June the dramatic reaction she was clearly expecting. Instead, Lorraine simply nodded once and turned toward the door. "Wait, that's it." June called after her. "You're just leaving?" Lorraine paused at the threshold. When she looked back, June's face showed confusion, almost disappointment. She'd wanted a fight. She'd wanted tears or anger or some kind of emotional breakdown that would justify her behavior to these women. "Enjoy your party," Lorraine said. She walked out without another word, ignoring the whispered conversations that erupted behind her. The hostess smiled awkwardly as she passed, pretending not to have overheard. Outside, Lorraine sat in her car for a full minute, hands resting on the steering wheel. 28 years. 28 years of trying to bridge a gap that June seemed determined to widen. Lorraine had funded June's college education, her first apartment, her startup influencer equipment. She'd been supportive when June chose social media over the tech career Lorraine had hoped for. She'd bitten her tongue through years of passive-aggressive comments and manufactured slights, but this was different. This was a line crossed. Lorraine started the engine and drove home to her house in the hills above the city. The afternoon sun cast patterns through the windows of her home office as she sat down at her desk. She pulled out a manila folder and wrote 2 words on the tab: debt of gratitude. Then she opened her laptop and began to work. 3 days later, Lorraine stood in her kitchen making coffee when her assistant Marco knocked on the front door. She could see him through the window, holding a FedEx envelope with a puzzled expression. "This came to the office addressed to you personally," Marco said as she let him in. "Marked urgent." Marco Reyes had been part of her life for 15 years, ever since she'd taken in the 12-year-old foster kid who'd been bounced between homes. Now 27, he was her CFO and the closest thing to family she had left. His dark eyes showed concern as he handed her the envelope. "Coffee," she offered. "Always." She poured 2 cups while Marco settled at her kitchen island, his laptop already open. Even during his personal visits, work was never far away. It was something they shared, the understanding that building something meaningful required constant attention. Lorraine opened the FedEx envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Her coffee cup froze halfway to her lips as she read the header: Invoice. Below it, in neat columns, Kincaid Mercer Wedding and Honeymoon Venue Rental, the Grand Olympic Hotel $45, 000 Catering, 150 guests $28, 500 photography/videography, $12, 000 Flowers and Decorations, $8, 500 music and entertainment, $5, 500 honeymoon, 2 weeks in Tuscany, $2, $8.85 total due, $102, $3.85 at the bottom. Both June and Dax had signed their names, but it was the handwritten note that made Lorraine's blood pressure spike. "Be thankful I let you contribute. This is your legacy after all." "What is it?" Marco asked, noticing her expression. Lorraine slid the invoice across the counter. Marco read it once, then again, his eyebrows climbing higher. "Are you kidding me?" He looked up at her. "After what she said at the bridal shower, she's sending you a bill." "Apparently so." Marco flipped the paper over, as if expecting to find some explanation on the back. "This isn't a request. It's written like you already agreed to pay for everything." Lorraine took a long sip of coffee, her mind racing. The numbers were significant, more than most people made in 2 years. But it wasn't the money that bothered her. She could write this check without thinking twice. It was the assumption, the entitlement, the way June had crafted this as if Lorraine owed her something. "What are you going to do?" Marco asked. Lorraine walked to her office and returned with the manila folder she'd started 3 days ago. She slipped the invoice inside. "Research," she said. Marco knew that tone. He'd heard it in board meetings when competitors underestimated her, in negotiations when lawyers tried to intimidate her. It was the voice of someone who'd built a software company from her garage into a $50 million enterprise. "What kind of research?" "The legal kind. I want to understand exactly what June and Dax's financial situation looks like." "Lorraine." Marco's voice carried a warning. "Are you sure you want to go down this road?" She looked at him, this young man she'd raised, who'd seen her through her divorce, who'd worked beside her to build something lasting. Marco understood her better than anyone, which meant he knew she'd already made her decision. "She chose the terms of engagement," Lorraine said. "I'm just responding in kind." 2 days later, Marco knocked on Lorraine's office door at 7 a.m., carrying a thick folder and 2 cups of coffee from the shop downstairs. "You're going to want to sit down for this," he said. Lorraine's downtown Seattle office occupied the entire top floor of a historic building she'd bought and renovated 5 years earlier. Windows on 3 sides provided views of Elliott Bay, the Olympic Mountains, and the bustling streets below. She'd designed the space to be impressive, but not intimidating, a place where deals could be made and partnerships forged. Marco spread several documents across her conference table. "I used only public records, asset searches, and information that's legally accessible. Nothing shady, What did you find? June's in trouble. Deep trouble. Marco pulled out a credit report. 35,000 in credit card debt across 7 different cards. Most of them are maxed out. Lorraine studied the numbers. Her Instagram shows her living like she's making serious money. That's the problem. Her influencer income has dropped 60% in the last year. She's down to maybe $4,000 a month in sponsorship deals, and that's before taxes and business expenses. Marco flipped to another document. It gets worse. She took out personal loans totaling $60,000 over the past 18 months. The payments alone are eating up most of her income. And Dax? Marco's expression darkened. Dax Kincaid is a walking financial disaster. 3 LLCs in the past 5 years, all failed. His brand consulting business exists mainly on paper. I found tax records showing he made less than $25,000 last year. That's not enough to live on, which explains why he's facing 2 lawsuits. One for breach of contract with a client who paid him $15,000 for a marketing campaign he never delivered. Another for defamation. Apparently he trashed a former business partner online when their company folded. Lorraine absorbed this information. Through June's social media, Dax appeared successful, always dressed well, posting from expensive restaurants, talking about his consulting clients. It was all smoke and mirrors. There's more, Marco continued. The wedding vendors? Every single contract was signed with the expectation that you'd be paying. Some of them specifically reference family funding and parental contribution in the terms. They assumed I'd already agreed to pay. June told them you had. I found email chains where she's discussed her mother's commitment to cover costs. Some vendors even sent thank you notes to your business address. Lorraine stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. People hurried along the sidewalks, focused on their own problems, their own struggles. Most of them would never face a betrayal this calculated from their own child. What about the engagement metrics she's been posting? Lorraine asked. Marco pulled up June's Instagram on his tablet. This is the interesting part. She's been inflating her engagement numbers, buying fake likes and comments to make her account look more valuable to sponsors. I can't prove it definitively without access to her analytics, but the patterns are obvious to anyone who knows what to look for. Is that illegal? It's fraud if she's using those fake numbers to secure paid partnerships. Some brands are getting wise to it. I found 3 sponsors who've recently pulled out of deals with her, citing metric discrepancies. Lorraine returned to the table and looked at the papers spread before her. This wasn't just entitlement or poor planning. This was a deliberate scheme. June and Dax had constructed an elaborate financial trap, counting on Lorraine's guilt and sense of family obligation to bail them out. They're broke, she said. Completely. Without this wedding money, they're looking at bankruptcy within 6 months. Lorraine picked up the original invoice and read June's handwritten note again. Be thankful I let you contribute. This is your legacy after all. The irony was perfect. June had positioned this as Lorraine's obligation, her chance to prove her worth as a mother. But it was actually June who was desperate, who needed this money to survive. The public humiliation at the bridal shower hadn't been about severing ties, it had been about creating distance, so the eventual ask for money would seem more reasonable. What do you want to do? Marco asked. Lorraine closed the folder and looked at him. Nothing. Nothing. I'm going to do exactly nothing. No check. No wire transfer. No contribution of any kind. She paused. But I am going to send a response. She walked to her desk and pulled out a piece of her personal stationery. In her neat handwriting, she wrote, "Thank you for the opportunity to support your new life. You'll have what you need soon." She signed it and handed it to Marco. "Have this messengered to June today." Marco read the note and looked up at her. "This is going to make her think you're paying." "I know." "Lorraine, what are you really planning?" She smiled, but it wasn't a warm expression. I'm going to give June exactly what she asked for. She wanted to cut me out of her life, to make it clear that I don't belong. She wanted to treat our relationship as a business transaction. Lorraine walked back to the window, her voice growing quieter but more intense. So that's what she'll get, a business transaction. And like any business transaction, I'm going to read the fine print very carefully. 1 week after sending her carefully worded response, Lorraine sat in her attorney's office in downtown Seattle. Patricia Winters had been handling her legal affairs for 12 years, ever since Lorraine's divorce. She was a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in complex financial disputes and had never lost a case that mattered. You want to freeze June's trust fund? Patricia asked, reviewing the documents spread across her mahogany desk. Temporarily delay the transfer pending verification of legitimate business use, Lorraine corrected. The trust was set up to transfer automatically when June turns 30, but there's language about preventing funds from being used for fraudulent purposes. Patricia flipped through the trust documents. These clauses were put in place during your divorce to prevent your ex-husband from accessing the money through June. Exactly, but they apply to any fraudulent use of the funds. And you're saying June's wedding planning constitutes fraud? Lorraine slid a folder across the desk. She's told vendors that I've committed to paying without my authorization. She's signed contracts using my name as a credit reference. And she's inflated her social media metrics to secure sponsorship deals that are partially funding this wedding. Patricia read through Marco's research, her expression growing more serious. This is substantial. The forged credit references alone could constitute wire fraud if they cross state lines. I don't want to press criminal charges. Yet, I just want to exercise my legal rights to protect my assets while conducting due diligence. How long do you want the delay? Lorraine checked her watch. The wedding is in 3 weeks. I think 30 days would be appropriate for a thorough review. Patricia made notes on her legal pad. What about the gift transfers you've made in the past? The apartment down payment, the car, the business equipment. I want those reviewed too. If June has been misrepresenting our relationship to vendors and sponsors, claiming I'm financially backing her business when I've made no such commitment, then previous gifts may need to be reassessed for tax purposes. This was perfectly legal, but would create immediate problems. Any gift over $15,000 had to be properly documented for tax purposes. If June had been claiming Lorraine's previous generosity as ongoing business support rather than personal gifts, it could trigger audits and penalties. You're essentially freezing her access to any family money, Patricia observed. I'm ensuring that my assets are protected while I evaluate whether previous financial support was obtained under false pretenses. Patricia closed the folder. I can have the paperwork filed by tomorrow morning. The trust fund freeze will be immediate. The gift review will take longer to implement, but will create uncertainty about June's financial backing. Perfect. As Lorraine left the attorney's office, her phone buzzed with a text from Marco. June just posted another wedding countdown. 3 weeks until the best day of my life, with a picture of her ring. Lorraine didn't respond. She had work to do. The next morning, she sat in her office making a series of phone calls. The first was to her accountant. David, I need you to flag any business uses of my name or company in relation to wedding vendors. Send cease and desist letters to anyone who's been told I'm providing financial backing without written authorization. Are we talking about June's wedding? We're talking about unauthorized use of my credit and reputation for business purposes. Her second call was to a private investigator she'd used for corporate due diligence. I need verification of social media metrics for an influencer. Specifically, I need documentation of any artificially inflated engagement numbers. The third call was to Marco. I want you to monitor June's social media and vendor communications. Don't engage, just observe. If she makes any public statements about my financial involvement in her wedding, document them. By noon, the first domino had fallen. Patricia called to confirm that June's trust fund was officially frozen pending review. The bank would send notification within 24 hours. Lorraine's phone rang at 2:47 p.m. June's name appeared on the screen. She let it go to voicemail. The message was predictable. Mom, I got a weird letter from some law firm about my trust fund. Can you call me back? There must be some mistake. Lorraine deleted the message without saving it. That evening, she received a text. Call me. Now. She turned off her phone and poured herself a glass of wine. Outside her windows, Seattle glittered in the twilight. Somewhere across the city, June was probably discovering that her financial house of cards was starting to collapse. The next morning brought more calls from June, all ignored. But at 10 a.m., Marco knocked on her office door with his laptop open. You need to see this, he said. June's Instagram story showed her in her apartment, looking distressed. The caption read, When family tries to sabotage your happiness, some people can't stand to see others succeed. The post had been up for 2 hours and already had hundreds of comments. Most were supportive, but a few asked pointed questions about what had happened. She's testing the waters, Marco observed, seeing if she can create a narrative where you're the villain. Let her try. But Marco looked concerned. Some of her followers have real influence. If she decides to go public with this family drama, she won't, Lorraine said confidently. Going public would mean admitting she needs my money. That destroys her brand as an independent success story. Marco nodded slowly. You're thinking several moves ahead. I've been playing this game longer than she has. As if summoned by their conversation, Lorraine's phone rang. This time it wasn't June, it was her older sister B. Lorraine, what the hell are you doing to that girl? Lorraine put the call on speaker so Marco could hear. Hello, B. How are you? Don't hello be me. June called me crying. She says you're trying to steal her trust fund right before her wedding. I'm not stealing anything. I'm exercising my legal rights as the trust administrator. Over what? She's getting married, Lorraine. This is supposed to be the happiest time of her life. Lorraine looked out her office window at the busy street below. Did she tell you about the invoice she sent me? What invoice? For $102,000. For a wedding I wasn't invited to pay for a celebration of a relationship with a daughter who publicly stated I don't belong in her life. Silence on the other end. Then she sent you a bill? With a lovely note about how I should be grateful for the opportunity to contribute to her legacy. B was quiet for a long moment. Okay, that's not great. But she's young, Lorraine. She makes mistakes. This isn't a mistake. It's a calculated business transaction. She's treating me like a bank she can withdraw from after publicly severing our relationship. So you're going to ruin her wedding over it? The question hung in the air. Marco watched Lorraine's face, waiting to see how she'd respond. I'm not ruining anything, Lorraine said finally. I'm simply not participating in my own exploitation. If June wants to treat our relationship as a business arrangement, then I'm going to treat it like one. That means contracts, documentation, and mutual benefit. You're being vindictive. I'm being smart. There's a difference. B sighed heavily. This is going to destroy your relationship with her forever. She already destroyed it. I'm just refusing to pretend otherwise. After B hung up, Marco closed his laptop. Your sister's going to keep pushing on this. Let her. BA's been enabling June's behavior for years. She thinks being family means accepting unlimited abuse as long as it's wrapped in emotional manipulation. And you don't. Lorraine turned to face him. Marco, when you were 15 and stole money from my purse to buy drugs, what did I do? You pressed charges. Because I loved you enough to let you face consequences. The charges were dropped when you completed rehab. but you learned that actions have results. That's why you're sitting here today as my CFO instead of in prison or dead from an overdose. Marco nodded. June never learned that lesson. Because everyone in her life has been too afraid of losing her to hold her accountable. Her father, her aunt, her friends, they all just absorb her behavior and make excuses for it. But you won't. I can't. Not anymore. 3 days later, Lorraine's phone exploded with notifications. June had posted a video to her Instagram account, not a story that would disappear, but a permanent post that would reach her entire following of 180,000 people. The video showed June sitting on her couch, makeup-free, eyes red from crying. She looked directly into the camera with the kind of vulnerable authenticity that her followers craved. "Hi, everyone," she began, her voice shaky. "I wasn't going to talk about this publicly, but I think it's important to be honest about what I'm going through right now." She paused, wiping her eyes with a tissue. "As most of you know, my wedding is in 2 weeks. Dax and I have been planning this day for over a year, and it's supposed to be the happiest time of our lives. But my family, specifically my mother, has decided to use this moment to hurt me in the most devastating way possible." Marco, who was watching the video in Lorraine's office, looked up at her. Lorraine's expression was stone cold as June continued. "My mother has frozen my trust fund and is trying to block payments for my wedding. She's claiming I've done something fraudulent, which is completely untrue. The real reason is that she can't stand to see me happy and independent." June's voice broke slightly. "I know this is hard for people to understand. When you see someone successful, you assume their family is supportive. But sometimes the people who should love you most are the ones who try to tear you down when you're building something beautiful." The video continued for another 3 minutes, with June talking about narcissistic family members and financial abuse and the importance of setting boundaries with toxic people. She never mentioned Lorraine by name, but anyone who knew June would understand exactly who she was talking about. The response was immediate and intense. Comments poured in. "I'm so sorry you're going through this, babe. Family can be the worst. Stay strong. Your real family is the one you choose. What kind of mother tries to sabotage her daughter's wedding?" But there were other comments too. "Wait, what exactly did you do that she's calling fraudulent? If she froze your trust fund, there must be a legal reason. This seems like there's more to the story." Within hours, the video had been viewed 50,000 times and shared across multiple platforms. June's hashtag #WeddingWithoutFamily started trending in Seattle's social media circles. Lorraine's phone started ringing. First reporters from local lifestyle blogs, then her business contacts who'd seen the video, then friends who were concerned about the public nature of the dispute. She ignored them all, but she couldn't ignore the email that arrived from her largest client, a Fortune 500 company that used her software for their HR systems. The email was diplomatically worded, but clear. They were concerned about reputational issues and wanted to discuss recent social media tension at their next meeting. Marco found her in her office at 8 p.m., still at her desk, reading through similar messages from 3 other major clients. "This is getting out of hand," he said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "It's exactly what I expected. Your clients are worried about their brand association with yours. If June keeps pushing this narrative, she'll overplay her hand." Lorraine finished. "June's always been her own worst enemy. She can't help herself." As if on cue, Lorraine's phone buzzed with a notification. June had posted another video, this one filmed in her car outside a wedding vendor's office. "Update on my situation," June said, her voice tight with frustration. "I just got out of a meeting with my wedding planner, and apparently several vendors have received legal letters claiming my mother never authorized payment for services. This is insane. She's actively trying to sabotage my wedding by lying to vendors." This video was angrier, more desperate. June's carefully crafted vulnerability was cracking, revealing the entitled rage underneath. "I want to be clear, my mother promised to help with wedding costs. She gave me her word. Now, she's backing out and trying to make me look like a liar. This is beyond cruel. It's sociopathic. The comments on this video were more mixed. Some followers were still supportive, but others were asking harder questions. Did she promise in writing? If vendors got legal letters, that means lawyers are involved. This doesn't sound like a family disagreement anymore. She's losing control of the narrative, Marco observed. And she knows it. That's why she's getting more aggressive. Lorraine's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and saw BEA's name. You need to stop this, B said without preamble. June is falling apart. June is showing her true character. I'm just refusing to enable it. She's your daughter, Lorraine. Your only child. She's a grown woman who made her choices. I'm making mine. What choices? What did she actually do that was so terrible? Lorraine pulled out the file she'd been building and flipped it open. She told wedding vendors I had committed to paying without asking me. She used my business reputation as collateral for credit she couldn't obtain on her own. She's been inflating her social media metrics to secure sponsorship deals. And she sent me an invoice for over $100,000 with a note telling me I should be grateful for the privilege. Okay, but she cut me out of her life publicly, B. She humiliated me in front of a room full of people and told me I don't belong in her life. Then she tried to bill me for the privilege. This isn't about money. It's about respect. So you're going to prove you deserve respect by destroying her wedding. Lorraine stood up and walked to her window. The city lights stretched out below her, millions of people living their lives, facing their own challenges. I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply not participating in my own abuse. If June's wedding can't happen without my money, after she's made it clear I'm not welcome in her life, then maybe it shouldn't happen. Jesus, Lorraine, when did you become so cold? The question hit harder than B probably intended. Lorraine closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about the young woman she'd been when June was born, full of hope and dreams for their relationship. She'd imagined mother-daughter shopping trips, heart-to-heart conversations, sharing the wisdom she'd gained from building her business. Instead, she'd gotten 28 years of manipulation, entitlement, and emotional warfare. I became this cold the day my daughter decided I was only valuable for my bank account, Lorraine said quietly, but was silent for a long moment. Then, you're going to regret this. Maybe, but I'll regret enabling her abuse more. After B hung up, Marco cleared his throat. There's something else. My contact at the PI firm called. They've documented June's fake engagement metrics. It's sophisticated. She's been buying likes, comments, and followers for over a year. Some of her recent sponsored posts have engagement rates that are mathematically impossible for an account her size. How sophisticated? Professional level fraud. This isn't just buying a few hundred likes. She's created an entire network of fake accounts to make her metrics look legitimate. If her sponsors knew about this, they could sue her for fraud. Lorraine nodded. This was worse than she'd thought. June wasn't just entitled and manipulative, she was actively committing fraud to maintain her lifestyle. There's more, Marco continued. I found correspondence between June and one of her major sponsors. She specifically told them that her mother, meaning you, had endorsed their product and would be featuring it at the wedding. They're planning a whole campaign around your supposed participation. She's using my reputation to secure deals. It gets worse. She sent them a fake letter of endorsement with your forged signature. Lorraine felt something cold settle in her chest. This wasn't just about wedding bills or family drama anymore. June had committed actual fraud, using Lorraine's name and reputation to secure business deals. I need to see that letter. Marco opened his laptop and turned it toward her. The letter was on Lorraine's business letterhead, which June could have copied from any number of documents over the years. The signature looked convincing at first glance, but Lorraine could see the subtle differences in the pen strokes. "This is a felony," she said quietly. "Yes, it is." Lorraine stared at the forged letter, her daughter's signature at the bottom of a document that could destroy both their reputations if it became public. All for a sponsorship deal worth maybe $5,000. "What do you want to do?" Marco asked. Before Lorraine could answer, her phone rang again. This time it was June. Lorraine looked at the screen for a moment, then answered. "Hello, June." "Mom." June's voice was strained, desperate. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About this situation. About the wedding. About us." "There is no us, remember? You made that very clear at your bridal shower." "I was upset. I said things I didn't mean." "You meant every word. And now you're dealing with the consequences." "Mom, please. I need your help." For the first time in their conversation, June sounded genuinely vulnerable instead of manipulative. But Lorraine had heard this tone before, usually right before June asked for money or a favor. "You need my money," Lorraine corrected. "Not my help. Not my love. Not my presence at your wedding. Just my money." "That's not true." "Then uninvite me from paying the bill. Handle your own wedding costs. Build your own life without my involvement." Silence on the other end. Then June's voice smaller. "I can't." "I know. The vendors are going to cancel everything. The venue, the catering, the flowers. Everything. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to treat me like an ATM with no feelings. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry I hurt you. But you can't punish me like this. This is my wedding, Mom. This is supposed to be the most important day of my life." Lorraine looked at Marco, who was watching her face carefully. She could end this right now. Write the check, save the wedding, pretend everything was fine. But that would just reset the cycle. June would learn that she could abuse Lorraine as long as she eventually apologized when she needed something. The pattern would continue, getting worse each time. "Your wedding is exactly as important as you made me feel at your bridal shower," Lorraine said. "You get back exactly what you put in." "What does that mean?" "It means you chose this path. Now walk it." Lorraine hung up and turned off her phone. Marco was quiet for a moment. Then, that was hard to watch. It had to be done. "Are you okay?" Lorraine looked at the forged letter, still glowing on Marco's laptop screen. Her daughter had committed fraud using her name, tried to manipulate her through social media, and was now calling to apologize only because she needed money. "I'm fine," she said, but June's about to discover what consequences actually look like. Lorraine woke up on Friday morning to 17 missed calls from various Seattle phone numbers. She didn't recognize most of them, but a quick Google search revealed they were wedding vendors, florists, caterers, and event planners. She didn't call them back. Instead, she made coffee and settled into her home office to read the morning news. Her phone continued to buzz with incoming calls and text messages, but she ignored them all. Outside her windows, Seattle was waking up to a beautiful spring day, the kind of weather that would have been perfect for an outdoor wedding day at 9 a.m. Marco arrived with breakfast and his laptop. "It started," he said, setting a bag of pastries on her desk. "I've been monitoring vendor communications and social media. 3 major vendors canceled on June yesterday afternoon." "Which ones?" "The florist, the photographer, and the string quartet. They all cited the same reason: inability to verify payment authorization." Marco opened his laptop and showed her a series of emails. The vendors had received Lorraine's cease and desist letters and had done their due diligence. When they couldn't get written confirmation that Lorraine had actually agreed to pay, they'd exercise their cancellation clauses. "The venue is wavering too," Marco continued. "The Grand Olympic Hotel is requiring full payment by noon today or they'll cancel the reception." Lorraine sipped her coffee, feeling oddly calm. "What about June?" Radio silence since yesterday evening. Her last Instagram post was the angry video from her car. Nothing since then. This was unlike June, who usually posted multiple times per day. Her social media presence was her business, her brand, her lifeline to the income that kept her afloat. Going silent meant she was either planning something big or completely falling apart. At 10:30 a.m., Lorraine's phone rang with a call from Patricia Winters. "The hotel just called my office," Patricia said. "They're looking for authorization to charge your credit card for the wedding reception. Apparently June told them you'd handle it directly with them." "I never spoke to the hotel." "I know, but June provided them with your business address and told them to send the invoice there. They're trying to be helpful by calling for verbal authorization first." Lorraine stood up and walked to her window. Down on the street, people were going about their normal Friday routines, heading to work, meeting friends for lunch, living their uncomplicated lives. "What did you tell them?" "That you've given no such authorization, and any charges attempted without written approval would be contested as fraudulent." "Good." "Lorraine, there's something else. I received a call from June's attorney this morning." This was interesting. "June has an attorney?" "Apparently. Someone named Mitchell Barnes from a small family law practice in Bellevue. He's claiming you're breaching your fiduciary duty as trustee by freezing June's trust fund for personal reasons." Lorraine felt a flicker of irritation. June was escalating, bringing in lawyers to try to force Lorraine's hand. "What did you tell him?" "That the trust explicitly allows for delays when fraudulent use is suspected, and that we have documentation of several instances where June has misrepresented your financial involvement to third parties." "How did he respond?" "He backed down pretty quickly. I don't think he understood the strength of our position when he took the case." At noon, Marco's phone buzzed with a notification. He checked it and looked up at Lorraine with raised eyebrows. June just posted something. He handed her his phone. June had posted a photo of herself in what appeared to be a hospital waiting room, looking exhausted and disheveled. The caption read, "When the stress of planning a wedding while dealing with family sabotage lands you in the ER. Thank you to everyone who's been supportive during this incredibly difficult time. Some people will do anything to maintain control, even if it means destroying their child's happiness. Hashtag wedding stress, hashtag toxic family, hashtag choosing myself. She's in the hospital." Marco asked. Lorraine studied the photo more carefully. June looked genuinely distressed, but something about the image felt staged. The lighting was too good, her makeup too carefully applied for someone who'd been rushed to the emergency room. "Call the local hospitals," Lorraine said. "Find out if she was actually admitted." While Marco made calls, Lorraine's phone rang. It was Bea, and her voice was frantic. "June's in the hospital, Lorraine. Are you happy now?" "What's wrong with her?" "Panic attack. She collapsed at the wedding venue this morning when they told her everything was being cancelled. Dax had to call an ambulance." Lorraine felt a flicker of concern, quickly suppressed. "Is she okay?" "She's devastated. Her wedding is ruined, her finances are destroyed, and her own mother won't even return her calls. She made her choices." "Jesus, Lorraine. She's in the hospital. Can't you put aside your pride for one day?" Pride. As if this was about ego rather than principle. As if 28 years of manipulation and abuse could be overlooked because June was finally facing consequences. "I hope she recovers quickly," Lorraine said. "But this doesn't change anything. You're unbelievable. Your daughter is having a breakdown, and all you can think about is your wounded feelings. My daughter created this situation. She can resolve it." Bea's voice turned cold. "Don't call me again. I'm done with you." The line went dead. Marco looked up from his phone calls. "No record of June being admitted to any local hospital in the past 24 hours, he reported. "A few emergency room visits for minor issues, but nothing matching her description or timing." So the hospital photo was likely staged, designed to generate sympathy and pressure. June was escalating her manipulation tactics, trying to make Lorraine look heartless for not rushing to her bedside at 2 p.m. Lorraine's phone rang with a call she hadn't expected. The caller ID showed June's number, but the voice was male. Ms. Mercer? This is Dax Kincaid. I'm calling about June. Lorraine put the call on speaker so Marco could hear. Hello, Dax. Look, I know you and June have had your differences, but this has gone too far. She's falling apart. The wedding vendors are all canceling. The venue wants full payment by 5 p.m. or they're giving our date to someone else. And June hasn't stopped crying for 12 hours. His voice was strained, frustrated. This was the first time Lorraine had heard him sound anything other than confident and cocky. I'm sorry to hear that, Lorraine said neutrally. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're enjoying watching your daughter suffer. I'm not enjoying anything. I'm simply not participating in my own exploitation. Exploitation? She's asking for help with her wedding. Parents help with weddings. It's normal. Parents are invited to weddings. They're treated with respect. They're consulted on decisions. I was excluded from all of that and then sent a bill. Dax was quiet for a moment. Then, okay, maybe June handled that badly, but you're her mother. You're supposed to be the bigger person. I was the bigger person for 28 years. It didn't work. So you're just going to let her wedding be destroyed over some family drama? Lorraine looked at Marco, who was shaking his head slightly. He'd clearly taken an instant dislike to Dax, probably recognizing a fellow manipulator. Dax, let me ask you something. How much money have you contributed to this wedding? Silence. How much of your own money are you putting toward this celebration of your love for June? More silence. Because from what I can see, you've contributed nothing except the expectation that someone else will pay for everything. Is that correct? That's not. It's more complicated than that. No, it's not. You're a grown man who can't afford to pay for his own wedding, so you're pressuring your fiancée to manipulate her estranged mother into footing the bill. That's not love, Dax. That's exploitation. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I built a $50 million company from nothing. I understand business, manipulation, and people who think they're entitled to other people's money. Dax's voice turned angry. You're a cold-hearted bitch, you know that? No wonder June wants nothing to do with you. And yet, here you are calling me for money. This isn't about money. It's about doing the right thing for your daughter. The right thing would have been June treating me with respect and having an honest conversation about wedding costs. Instead, she chose manipulation and public humiliation. These are the consequences of that choice. You're going to regret this. Maybe, but I'll regret enabling her behavior more. Dax hung up without another word. Marco closed his laptop. Well, he seems charming. He's exactly what June deserves. They're both manipulative, entitled, and convinced the world owes them something. What happens now? Lorraine checked her watch. It was 3:30 p.m. In 90 minutes, the hotel would cancel June's reception if full payment wasn't received. Other vendors had already pulled out. The wedding scheduled for tomorrow was effectively over. Now we wait and see if June learned anything from this experience. At 4:45 p.m., Lorraine's phone rang one final time. June's name appeared on the screen. She answered. Mom. June's voice was barely a whisper. Hello, June. Please, I'm begging you. Just this once, please help me. For a moment, Lorraine heard the little girl June had once been vulnerable, scared, needing her mother's protection. It would be so easy to say yes, to write the check, to save the day and pretend everything was fine. But that little girl had grown into a woman who'd chosen manipulation over honesty, entitlement over gratitude, and public humiliation over private conversation. I owe you nothing, Lorraine said quietly. You severed our bond. That was your right. What comes next? That's mine. She hung up and turned off her phone. Outside her windows, Seattle continued its Friday afternoon rhythm. Somewhere across the city, June was probably making frantic calls to relatives, friends, anyone who might lend her money for tomorrow's disaster, but Lorraine was done. She'd given June every opportunity to choose differently, to treat their relationship with respect, to acknowledge the damage she'd caused. June had chosen otherwise. Now she would live with the consequences. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of perfect spring weather that wedding planners dream about. Lorraine woke up early in her mountain cabin, 2 hours north of Seattle, where she'd driven the night before to avoid any last-minute attempts at contact from June or her extended family. The cabin sat on 20 acres of pine forest overlooking a small lake. She'd bought it 5 years earlier as a retreat from the demands of running her company, a place where she could think clearly without the distractions of city life. This morning, she needed that clarity more than ever. She made coffee and settled onto the wraparound porch with her laptop and phone, which she'd finally turned back on. 17 new voicemails waited, but she ignored them. Instead, she opened her laptop and pulled up June's Instagram account. Nothing new since yesterday's hospital photo at 8:09 a.m. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marco. It's starting. He'd spent the night monitoring social media and vendor communications from his apartment in the city. What followed was a steady stream of updates that painted a picture of complete collapse. 9:15 a.m. First guests arriving at the Grand Olympic. Venue doors are locked. Manager talking to confused people in the lobby. 9:32 a.m. June's maid of honor just posted asking if anyone knows what's happening. Wedding ceremony was supposed to start at 10:30, 9:45 a.m. Catering truck showed up, got turned away. Driver looks pissed. Lorraine read each update with growing detachment. She'd imagined this moment for weeks, but the reality felt surreal. Somewhere in Seattle, 150 people were discovering that the wedding they'd dressed up for, traveled for, cleared their schedules for, simply didn't exist. 10:15 a.m. Photographer just posted on Instagram asking why no one's at the venue. Says he's been waiting for an hour. 10:30 a.m. Guests starting to leave. Overheard someone saying the bride is having a breakdown. Lorraine poured herself another cup of coffee and walked to the edge of her property, where a small dock extended into the lake. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the cloudless sky like a mirror. She'd brought June here once, when she was 12, for a weekend of fishing and hiking. June had complained about the lack of Wi-Fi and spent most of the time reading magazines in the cabin. Even then, they'd been living in different worlds. 11:00 a.m. Wedding party showed up at venue. Dax is yelling at hotel staff. June nowhere to be seen. 11:30 a.m. Hotel security escorted Dax out. He was screaming about lawsuits and fraud. 12:15 p.m. June finally posted, "You need to see this." Lorraine opened Instagram and found June's latest post. It was a video filmed in what looked like her apartment, with poor lighting and shaky camera work. June appeared exhausted, her face puffy from crying, her hair uncombed. "I don't know what to say to everyone who came to celebrate with us today," June began, her voice hoarse. "As most of you have figured out by now, there's no wedding. There's no reception. There's nothing." She paused, wiping her nose with a tissue. "My mother decided to destroy the most important day of my life because I hurt her feelings. She froze my trust fund, lied to vendors about payment, and sabotaged every aspect of our celebration. All because I didn't grovel enough for her approval." The camera shook as June's hands trembled. "I want everyone to understand what kind of person does this to their own child. What kind of mother uses money as a weapon to control and punish. I'm sharing this because I don't want anyone else to go through what I've been through." The video continued for another 2 minutes, with June describing Lorraine as narcissistic, manipulative, and emotionally abusive. She painted herself as the victim of a power-hungry mother who couldn't stand to see her daughter happy. The comments were immediate and brutal. "What did you actually do to make her freeze your trust fund?" This sounds like there's way more to this story. If you can't afford your own wedding, maybe don't have such an expensive one. But there were supportive comments too. I'm so sorry, babe. Family can be toxic. You're better off without people like that in your life. Focus on your husband and forget about her. Lorraine noticed that June had referred to Dax as her husband, even though no wedding had taken place. Either she was confused in her emotional state, or she was maintaining the fiction that they'd somehow gotten married despite the venue cancellation point 1:30 p.m. Dax posted a rant about rich people playing games with other people's lives. Getting roasted in the comments. 2:00 p.m. June's maid of honor posted a long explanation, trying to defend her. Comments are not friendly. 2:30 p.m. Local wedding blog picked up the story. Headline: Seattle influencer's wedding implodes over family drama. By 3 p.m., the story had escaped June's immediate social circle and was spreading across Seattle's wedding and social media communities. People were dissecting every aspect of the situation, from June's inflated engagement metrics to the legal implications of her trust fund freeze. The narrative June had tried to control was spinning away from her point. 4:00 p.m. June deleted the wedding video. 2 late screenshots everywhere. 4:30 p.m. 3 sponsors just dropped her. Posted statements about brand alignment and values. 5:15 p.m. Dax's car spotted leaving June's building with suitcases. Looks like he's moving out. Lorraine read this last update with interest. Dax had stayed loyal as long as there was hope for financial gain, but now that the money was gone and June's reputation was in shambles, he was cutting his losses. She wasn't surprised. Men like Dax were only as committed as their next opportunity. 6:00 p.m. June posted again. Brief video saying she needs space to heal and won't be posting for a while. Comments disabled. As the sun began to set over the lake, Lorraine reflected on the day's events. She felt no satisfaction in June's public humiliation, no joy in the collapsed wedding or Dax's abandonment, but she felt no regret either. June had been given every opportunity to choose differently. She could have approached Lorraine with respect, asked for help honestly, included her in the wedding planning. Instead, she'd chosen manipulation, fraud, and public humiliation. These were simply the natural consequences of those choices. Lorraine's phone rang. Marco's name appeared on the screen. "How are you doing?" he asked. "I'm fine. What about you?" "Honestly, it was hard to watch. I know June treated you terribly, but seeing someone's life implode in real time is difficult," Lorraine finished. "I know. But Marco, what would have happened if I'd given in? If I'd written the check and saved her wedding?" Marco was quiet for a moment. She would have learned that her behavior works, that she can abuse you as long as she eventually needs something. Exactly. This was the only way she might actually change. "Do you think she will? Change, I mean." Lorraine looked out over the lake, where the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "I don't know, but for the first time in her life, June is facing real consequences for her actions. No one's rescuing her, no one's making excuses for her, and no one's pretending her behavior is acceptable. That's got to count for something. We'll see." 2 weeks later, Lorraine sat in Patricia Winter's office reviewing a stack of legal documents. The aftermath of June's wedding collapse had generated significant paperwork. The lawsuit from June's attorney was dismissed, Patricia reported. "Once we provided documentation of her fraudulent use of your name and reputation. He withdrew the case immediately." "What about the sponsorship deal with the forged letter?" "Settled out of court. June agreed to pay restitution and issue a public apology. The company agreed not to press criminal charges." This had been the most serious legal consequence of June's actions. The forged endorsement letter could have resulted in felony fraud charges, but Lorraine had negotiated a civil settlement instead. She wanted June to face consequences but she didn't want to destroy her daughter's life completely. The trust fund situation is more complex, Patricia continued. June has retained new counsel, someone more competent than the first attorney. They're arguing that the fraudulent activity predates the trust terms and shouldn't affect her access to the funds. What's your assessment? They have a point legally, but they also know we have strong documentation of ongoing fraudulent behavior. I think they'll settle for a structured release rather than risk a full investigation. Meaning, June gets access to the trust funds, but in smaller payments over several years instead of a lump sum. It protects her from making more poor financial decisions while still giving her the resources she's legally entitled to. Lorraine nodded. This seemed fair. June would get her inheritance, but in a way that prevented her from immediately squandering it on another ill-conceived venture. What about her current financial situation? Difficult. She owes about $80,000 in combined credit card and personal loan debt. Her influencer income has dropped to almost nothing after the sponsorship cancellations. She's had to move to a smaller apartment and is apparently looking for traditional employment. For the first time since this began, Lorraine felt a flicker of sympathy for her daughter. June had spent years building her social media presence and had collapsed in a matter of days. Starting over in her late 20s, with significant debt and a damaged reputation, would be genuinely challenging, but it was also the first real accountability June had ever faced. Any word from June directly? Patricia asked. One email, very brief. 3 days earlier, Lorraine had received a message from June with the subject line, "I'm sorry." The body contained only 2 words, "I'm sorry." Lorraine had read it several times, looking for hidden manipulation or strings attached. But it seemed genuine, the first straightforward communication she'd received from June in years. She hadn't replied. "Are you planning to respond?" Patricia asked. "I don't know. Maybe. Eventually." The truth was more complicated. Part of Lorraine wanted to reach out, to see if this experience had genuinely changed June, to explore whether they might rebuild their relationship on healthier terms. But a larger part of her was exhausted by 30 years of manipulation and false apologies. June would need to prove her change through actions, not words. "There's one more thing," Patricia said, sliding a final document across the desk. "Your sister B has retained an attorney." Lorraine looked up sharply. "For what?" "She's claiming you've damaged her relationship with June by poisoning the family dynamic. She wants compensation for emotional distress and loss of family connection." This was almost funny. B had spent years enabling June's worst behavior, making excuses for her manipulation and criticizing Lorraine for setting boundaries. Now she wanted to sue because those patterns had finally been disrupted. How strong is her case? Non-existent. You can't sue someone for refusing to participate in their own abuse. But she's hired Mitchell Barnes, the same attorney who represented June initially. So she's serious. Serious but wrong. I expect this will be dropped once Barnes explains the legal realities to her. Lorraine gathered the documents and stood up. "Keep me informed. And Patricia, thank you for handling all of this with such professionalism." "Of course. How are you holding up personally?" It was a fair question. The past month had been emotionally exhausting, even though Lorraine was convinced she'd made the right choices. Cutting ties with June and now potentially be meant losing the only family connection she had left. "I'm okay," she said. "Some relationships are more costly to maintain than to lose." That evening, Lorraine sat in her home office updating her estate planning documents. It was time to formalize the decisions she'd been contemplating for weeks. She removed June from her will entirely, except for a small trust fund that would provide basic financial security but couldn't be accessed in a lump sum. The bulk of her $18 million estate would go to Marco, who had proven his loyalty and character over 15 years. The remaining assets would fund a nonprofit foundation focused on supporting young women in technology from low-income backgrounds. She would call it the Eleanor Mercer Foundation, after her grandmother, who had started her first business in 1943 with nothing but determination and borrowed capital. As she worked on the documents, Lorraine's phone buzzed with a text from Marco. June posted again. First time since the wedding. Curious despite herself, Lorraine opened Instagram and found June's latest post. It was a photo of June in what appeared to be a coffee shop, wearing simple clothes and no makeup, looking genuinely humble for the first time in years. The caption was brief: learning that rock bottom has excellent Wi-Fi. Taking a break from social media to focus on building something real instead of something that just looks good online. Thank you to everyone who's shown kindness during this difficult time. The comments were surprisingly supportive. This feels more authentic than anything you've posted in years. Sometimes we need to lose everything to find ourselves. Proud of you for taking accountability. Lorraine read through the comments, noting their tone. For the first time, June's followers were responding to vulnerability and growth rather than manufactured perfection and drama. Maybe June was finally learning. But Lorraine had been disappointed too many times to take this at face value. Real change took time, consistency, and actions that matched words. June would need to prove her transformation through months or years of different choices. Until then, Lorraine would protect herself and continue building the life she'd chosen. 6 months later, Lorraine stood at the podium of the Fairmont Olympic Hotel's Grand Ballroom, looking out at an audience of 250 people. The inaugural gala for the Eleanor Mercer Foundation had exceeded all expectations, raising over $500,000 in its first event. When my grandmother Eleanor started her first business in 1943, Lorraine began, she faced barriers that would discourage most people. As a woman in technology, she was told repeatedly that she didn't belong, that her ideas weren't valuable, that she should find a more appropriate career. The audience was attentive, engaged. These were successful professionals, entrepreneurs, and philanthropists who understood the challenges of building something meaningful. Eleanor didn't listen to those voices. She built a company that employed hundreds of people and pioneered innovations we still use today. But more importantly, she proved that barriers exist to be broken, not accepted. Lorraine paused, looking at the faces in the crowd. In the front row sat Marco, beaming with pride. Near the back, she spotted several of her business colleagues and clients who had supported the foundation's launch. The Eleanor Mercer Foundation exists to ensure that talented young women don't face those barriers alone. Our scholarships, mentorship programs, and startup funding remove financial obstacles and provide the support that can turn potential into achievement. As she spoke, Lorraine thought about the scholarship recipients seated at tables throughout the room. 25 young women from low-income backgrounds, each pursuing degrees or careers in technology, each facing challenges similar to what Eleanor had encountered 80 years earlier. This year, we funded 25 scholarships, launched 3 mentorship cohorts, and provided startup capital for 8 women-owned technology companies. But numbers only tell part of the story. Lorraine gestured to a table near the front where several scholarship recipients sat with their mentors. The real story is Jasmine Rodriguez, who used her scholarship to complete her computer science degree and just accepted a position at Microsoft. It's Ashley Chin, whose app for budget management has been downloaded over 50,000 times. It's Maria Santos, who started a nonprofit using technology to connect low-income families with healthcare resources. The applause was warm, genuine. These weren't people looking for tax deductions or social status. They were investors in human potential who understood that talent existed everywhere, but opportunity did not. After her speech, Lorraine mingled with guests, donors, and scholarship recipients. The conversations energized her in a way that business meetings rarely did anymore. These young women reminded her why she'd started her own company 30 years earlier, not just to build wealth, but to prove that women could succeed in spaces where they weren't traditionally welcome. Ms. Mercer. A young woman approached hesitantly. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with shoulder-length brown hair and nervous energy. Please call me Lorraine. You're one of our scholarship recipients. Yes, ma'am. Jasmine Rodriguez. I wanted to thank you personally for the opportunity. This was the young woman Lorraine had mentioned in her speech, the computer science graduate who'd just been hired by Microsoft. Tell me about your new position. Jasmine's face lit up. I'm joining their cloud computing security team. It's exactly what I wanted to do, but I never thought it would be possible without the foundation's support. What do you mean? I was working 3 part-time jobs to pay for school. My grades were suffering because I couldn't focus on studying. The scholarship didn't just pay for tuition, it gave me time to actually learn, to do internships, to build the skills that made me competitive. Lorraine nodded, remembering her own struggles as a young entrepreneur. She'd been fortunate to have family support and access to business loans, but many talented people weren't so lucky. What are your long-term goals? I want to start my own cybersecurity company eventually. There's so much room for innovation in protecting small businesses from digital threats. But first, I want to learn everything I can at Microsoft. That's smart. Build your expertise, understand the market, then create something new. As they talked, Lorraine felt a sense of satisfaction she'd rarely experienced in her business career. Helping Jasmine succeed wouldn't directly benefit Lorraine financially, but it would create ripple effects the innovations Jasmine developed. The employees she'd eventually hire, the problems she'd solve. This was what legacy actually looked like. Ms. Mercer. Another voice interrupted. Lorraine turned to see a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair. I'm Dr. Sarah Williams from the University of Washington's Computer Science Department. I wanted to thank you for creating the foundation. It's my pleasure. Are you involved with our scholarship program? Indirectly. Several of our students have received Eleanor Mercer scholarships, and the impact has been remarkable. These aren't just academic achievers, they're students who are on the verge of dropping out due to financial pressure. Your funding has changed their trajectory completely. Dr. Williams paused, choosing her words carefully. I also wanted to say that I admire your approach to philanthropy. Too many wealthy donors want their names on buildings or programs that make them look good. You've created something that actually solves problems. As the evening wound down, Lorraine found herself in conversation with a small group of foundation board members and major donors. They were discussing expansion plans, additional scholarship programs, and partnerships with other organizations. The demand is overwhelming, reported Jennifer Park, the Foundation's executive director. We received over 300 applications for 25 scholarships. Every single applicant was qualified and deserving. What would it take to double the program? Asked one of the donors. About $2 million in additional annual funding, Jennifer replied. That would let us support 50 scholars per year, plus expand our mentorship and startup funding programs. Lorraine made a mental note to discuss this with her financial advisor. Her company continued to generate significant profits, and she lived simply despite her wealth. Expanding the foundation's impact would be a meaningful use of those resources. As guests began to leave, a young woman approached Lorraine near the exit. She was perhaps 19 or 20, with nervous energy and an expression that seemed familiar. Ms. Mercer? I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Emma Richardson, one of the new scholarship recipients. It's wonderful to meet you, Emma. What's your area of study? Software engineering with a focus on artificial intelligence. I'm particularly interested in using AI to improve accessibility technology for people with disabilities. They talked for several minutes about Emma's research and career goals. She was articulate, passionate, and clearly brilliant. But something about her manner reminded Lorraine of someone. Though she couldn't place WHO to AS, Emma prepared to leave. She hesitated. Ms. Mercer, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Don't you ever regret not having a family legacy? I mean, you've built this amazing company and foundation, but don't you wish you had children or grandchildren to carry on your work? The question was almost identical to one Lorraine had been asked many times over the past 6 months. Friends, colleagues, and business acquaintances had all wondered aloud about her choice to focus on philanthropy rather than family reconciliation. Lorraine looked around the ballroom, where foundation staff were cleaning up after a successful evening. She thought about Jasmine Rodriguez starting her career at Microsoft, about the other scholarship recipients pursuing their dreams, about the young women who would benefit from the foundation in years to come. "I do have a family legacy," she said, smiling at Emma. "I just changed the definition." Emma looked confused for a moment, then understanding dawned on her face. "You mean the foundation? The scholarship recipients?" "I mean the impact. The innovations you'll create, the problems you'll solve, the barriers you'll break. That's a legacy that will last long after I'm gone." Emma smiled, a genuine expression of gratitude and understanding. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." As the young woman walked away, Lorraine felt a sense of completion she'd been seeking for years. She'd built a successful business, accumulated significant wealth, and achieved professional recognition. But none of those accomplishments had provided the deep satisfaction she felt tonight. This was what she'd been working toward without realizing it, not just personal success, but the ability to create opportunities for others, to remove barriers that had limited generations of women before them. Marco appeared at her side as the ballroom emptied. "Great event," he said. "Eleanor would have been proud." "I think so, too." They walked toward the exit together, past tables covered with information about the Foundation's programs and photos of scholarship recipients. Lorraine paused at one display showing the results of the Foundation's first year. 25 scholarships awarded, 3 businesses launched, over 200 women enrolled in mentorship programs. "Any regrets?" Marco asked quietly. Lorraine thought about June, who had sent one more email 3 weeks earlier with a single line. "I got a job at a nonprofit, learning a lot about myself." She'd included no requests for money, no attempts at manipulation, no complaints about her circumstances. Maybe June was genuinely changing. Maybe their relationship could eventually be rebuilt on healthier terms. But even if it couldn't, Lorraine had found peace with her choices. "No regrets," she said. "Just different priorities." They stepped out into the Seattle evening, where the city lights reflected off Elliott Bay and the Olympic Mountains stood silhouetted against the clear sky. Lorraine had lived in this city for 30 years, had built her business here, had raised Marco here, had watched June grow up here. But tonight felt like a new beginning rather than an ending that she'd spent decades trying to create a legacy through family relationships that were defined by manipulation and entitlement. Now she was building something based on merit, potential, and mutual respect that it was a legacy she could be proud of. "Ready to go home?" Marco asked. Lorraine took one last look at the hotel where her foundation had just celebrated its first major milestone. Inside, the cleanup crew was finishing their work. In a few hours, the ballroom would host another event, serve another purpose, but tonight had been hers. Tonight had been about the future she was creating, the women whose lives would be changed, the barriers that would be broken. "Yes," she said. "Let's go home."